Welcome to another episode of Behind the Dreamers. I'm Jennifer Loading, and we are talking to the achievers, the creators, the magic makers, and the dreamers. These are our friends, these are your friends, and they are living extraordinary. Well, I saw this quote today that I thought, oh my gosh, this just kind of fits with my guest today. You're probably going to like this, Steve. Ride the wild wind and live life on the razor's edge. I thought, oh my gosh, this is so like what we're going to be talking about today. So for my audience, my guest today says he spent most of his adult life avoiding the real world at all costs. And I can kind of resonate with that a little bit. Even though I don't do what you do, I can resonate with that. Those costs have included many broken bones, but they've also helped him overcome the daily fear. And I'm not going to tell you what this fear is. I'm just going to say performing dangerous tricks. You guys are going to have to stick around to find out what that is. But before we do that, we've got to do a shout out to our sponsors. So today's episode is brought to you by Walt Mills Photography. If you are a creator needing post-production, consultation, or promotion, Walt Mills is your guy. Whether short films, YouTube production, photography work, or a new headshot, he can help you find a solution to match your needs. To learn more about Walt and his work, go to photosbywalt.com. We also want to give a shout out to our friend Chris Clow of Upbeat Media Production. If you are in need of turnkey special event production, Clow is your go-to. To learn more about him and his work, go to upbeatmediapro.com. All right, so my guest today, Steve Sommerfeld. He is a professional freestyle motocross rider. He's been doing that since 2004. Am I correct?
Yeah, that would be my first competition. Absolutely.
All right, very cool. He's also a TV host, a commentator. He's an author, podcaster. He's doing all kinds of things. And then I saw you're also a voiceover artist. How fun. You've just got it all going on. So, Steve, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you here today.
Thank you very much for having me. Actually, the voiceover artistry, that's actually, I'm not going to say that's the easiest, but it's actually quite fun because you get to really try different voices out, and sometimes it works, sometimes it just boom, it comes naturally, and then sometimes you read a script and you say what you say and then you listen again and you think, no, there's much better people out there that do this than me. So it's a fun job, that one, the voice artist.
Yeah.
Should give it a shot.
Well, my ex-co-host that used to be on my show, she was an American Idol star. So if you follow anything with American Idol, back when Carrie Underwood was on, she was a top 100 finalist on the show. She's also done some voiceover work as well. And then I had another gal that came on that did that as well. And so I always think that's kind of interesting, kind of an interesting thing to do. And, and I've heard stuff, so I can imagine it could be kind of a tricky thing sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it's easy. Sometimes you just think, no, I'm not the right person for what you want. So it's very, very specific. It was much more specific than I thought when I first started.
Yeah. So, all right. So I want to open this up because, obviously for my guests, they're like, okay, where did this guy come from? Because you got this really cool accent. So we find cool people in cool places around the world, right? And so I saw your profile when I was looking through this Podmatch platform, and I'm like, freestyle motocross. This is like really cool. I've never met anybody that does that. But it's been fun, doing this podcast because I've brought various people on here. I've had some professional athletes on here. I've had a guy that did a world record, was on Joe Rogan's podcast, in the 100-mile race. And so I look for different people that are kind of doing unique things because I feel like there's a lot of parallels, even though we're doing different things, but there's a lot of parallels in these journeys that we're going through. And so this podcast is really about that journey, why you do what you do and why you're passionate about it. And so I'm just excited to chat with you about all this that you've got going on. So with all that, I want to start there. I want to know how this came about for you. How did this all start?
Just before I say that, I do want to say that I was impressed that you even roughly knew what freestyle motocross was when you read that. Most people just go, huh? What? And then you say, doing jumps, backflips, kind of like Evel Knievel, but, it's a bit different. So I'm actually very impressed that you even knew what that was to start with. No, so how did I get into it? Well, I grew up on a farm in Australia. So that's obviously the accent that you were alluding to before. And on my 4th birthday, my dad gave me a Pee-wee 50, a very small motorbike. And that afternoon, I was riding a few miles to go chase the cows, bring them in. And so we used to milk cows. That was our farm. We had a dairy farm. And because of having a dairy farm and being in motorbikes, we had a lot of land. We had about 500 acres. And I rode there, but I always wanted to race motocross. I loved it. I bought every magazine. I knew everybody in the sport, but the cows have to be milked twice a day, morning and night. There's no time for holidays. There's no time to leave. It's just work. So on the farm, I ended up just building my own jumps. And instead of racing, I went the other way and started doing something completely different, which was jumps, tricks, and that led to a completely different career than I ever thought I would have had.
That is so awesome. And yes, I did my homework before I got you on here. So I'm like, I got to check out and see what he's done. Like I went in, I'm like, I got to see what all this motocross is about. And, and you said something really neat here that you grew up on this farm. And, and I think there's a lot of work ethic that comes from that, and a lot of things that you learn doing that carry over into other things that you do throughout your life, right? Like it really transfolds into other areas. And so you definitely, I feel like, have to have some determination and will to do what you do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, definitely. Well, I'd say the work ethic, definitely. I know what waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning and milking cows and then going to school and coming home from school and then milking cows until 7 o'clock and then maybe we're baling hay until midnight. Like I know that side of the work ethic. The determination comes from never wanting to do that ever again. I'm done. That was just way too much. And I saw how hard that work was on my family, on mum and dad and grandma, granddad, and the rest of the family that popped in to help whenever we needed it as well. So the determination comes from never going back to doing that because it was backbreaking work. And something that I've realized once I started traveling the world and not just being in my little bubble in our little tiny town, Australia, for the most part, or at least where I'm from, is not that great for farming. There's not that much rain where we are. So when we moved over here to Germany, it rains every other day of the week. And I just thought, if we had a farm here, like, we would have actually done quite well. There's green grass for cows to eat. That's easy. We had no green grass. It was always a drama just to put water out as much as we did. We were unfortunately sucking the river dry. And that's also something we've learned along the way, sustainability and things like that. That was never even a thought 20, 30 years ago when I was on the farm. So it's quite funny. I've ran away from it as much as I can, but I'm getting sucked back. All I want right now is to have land again. So like I said, I'm in Germany. Land is a premium and I really want it. And for the life of me, I can't find it. I've been looking for the last couple of years to buy some land and a small house. All I want is the land and a roof that I can just live under. It's almost impossible. So, we grew up on the land, ran away from it. Now I'm kind of coming back to it.
It's funny that you say all that. And the reason I brought that up is because my husband grew up on a farm also. We're in the States, obviously, but he's from Montana. And they've had a ranch in their family for over 100 years now. And so I know how he is. He goes to bed at the same time, gets up at the same time. He's got incredible work ethic. You just learn certain things. And so that's why I made that comment to you. But I think what's funny is how we come back to our roots. We want to get away from those things. And then we sort of kind of are like, hey, I think it's that certainty, right? Like it's just, there's that piece of us that knows there's that a little bit of comfort there. that we sort of going to want to come back to that, you know?
Exactly. I ran as far and as fast from it as I could. As soon as I finished high school, I mean, Dad told me anyway, go get an education, go to university. So I did. I was in Brisbane and I was at university for far too long because it was easy. Because the other option was, you know, he always said, you've got three options. You're finished now. You can get a job in what you've just learnt. You can come back to the farm and milk cows, or go back to university if you don't like what you just did. And so I did that.
There you go.
Until I realized that riding a motorbike was a much better way of living my life and calling it a job, kind of.
Yeah. So tell us about, because like I said, I did the work. I looked into this a little bit. So I kind of know, like I told you, I like to do my homework before I get somebody on here, because I'm like, I need to know at least what we're talking about here, right? Yeah. So for people listening, because you mentioned early on, a lot of people don't. So maybe share a little bit about what that's like. You know, you're traveling, obviously, right? So maybe paint a little picture for our audience so they know what that is. Because I'm hoping that when they're done, they're going to go look at this and be like, I need to go check that out. What is that he's talking about?
So my job is to risk my life and perform in front of crowds around the world. And it's been the best job you could ever have. Apart from risking your life, that part, it does suck sometimes. Yes. But I would be doing everything that I do in front of a crowd. I would have done it at home for free. I would have done it in front of the cows, and Mum would have seen me out of the kitchen window, and that was also absolutely perfectly fine for me. I was just incredibly lucky that I was good enough to kind of get to the next level every time, but also lucky enough that this is even a job. I mean, until 30 years ago, action sports was not anything. There was no action sports. Then X Games came along, and from there, different sports evolved. So, I mean, there was surfing in the old days. We had Evel Knievel and a couple of other guys, but it wasn't the culture that then came in the 90s, early 2000s, and that sort of thing. So that's when I was in high school, and it just piqued my interest. I loved it. I definitely loved it. I never thought it was something that I could do. I never thought it would be a career possibility. But it was that determination not to work a real job like what I'd seen. I wanted to just do what I wanted to do, basically. Yeah. And when I finished university, I gave myself 1 year. I thought 1 year was enough, and just try it. See if there is enough shows out there, or if there's enough competitions that I can compete in, or are there enough sponsors to support me, or do I go back and actually go back into the real world? And I was very surprised. It worked better than I thought. It's not like I had millions of dollars thrown at me in sponsorships. It was absolutely far from that. But the doors that kept opening up every time I would do a show here, or I'd be in a magazine there or something like that, there was always just another email coming up or another phone call. And I remember in 2000 must have been like 2008 or something like that, I had a call from somebody to do 4 weeks of shows in Thailand. So, like I said, I grew up on a farm in a very small town. The most I did was go to Brisbane to university. I never would have considered leaving the country. So I didn't have a passport. Why would I need it? And I turned it down. I turned down that 1 month of traveling in Thailand, and a few of my friends went over and they did it and they loved it. And it still didn't really appeal to me. I wish I did it in a way, but in another sense, I thought, no, it's too much effort. And then the following year, I had another invitation to go to China. And again, I turned it down straight away. But this time my wife kind of put her foot down and said, go get your passport. Don't be a lazy bastard. Or whatever it was. It was probably half fear, half laziness. Just go get your passport. Just go and do it. Like, what an opportunity of a lifetime. and she basically dragged me to the passport office. I got it, flew into China, and from that moment on, it was like just, the light bulb went, and we've been traveling ever since. I'm living here in Germany. I've been in Germany now for 8 years. Like, who would have thought that could happen? So the job itself, what is the job? Well, I will get a call from promoters generally asking me to do shows wherever it is in the world. There's not that many people who do what we do. So it's a very, very small world, and all of us riders know each other, and generally most promoters will know who the riders are. And so yeah, I will travel. I've got my motorbikes here. This is in my studio. I've got the two of them. The other one's there. If I can just move my laptop a little bit. So so I would travel I would either fly into a country and they would have a motorbike for me, or I'll drive in a van or a truck or something and do the show. So we jump 75 feet in distance, about, I'm trying to do my maths now in feet, about 30 feet, 40 feet into the air, something like that.
Yeah.
Letting go of the bike, doing backflips, and hopefully landing on the other side. So that's the very basic part of what the job is, but it's telling you is not as much fun as just watching a video. So if
I saw it.
If you've all just listened to this, then that was boring. Just watch a video.
Watch a video. Yes, definitely.
In 5 seconds, it'll tell you more about it. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? And I went through, I was looking at, some of your things that you did, and you haven't just done it. You've done very well at it. It's not like, like I say that in the ultra running space, it's a small community because my husband's a runner and I'm a runner, and that those people that do those 100-mile trail races and stuff, that's like a very small community, same kind of thing where everybody pretty much knows everybody, and so when you have people that can do that, but then also do it very, very well, you're talking about an elite group of people here now, because it's already taking a lot to be able to do that and then turn around and be able to do it very, very well.
That's it. No, you're exactly right. Actually, that's funny that you talk about the running. Do you get into triathlons as well by any chance?
I have not done any triathlons. No, I haven't done my longest race has been I've done a couple marathons, but my husband's the one that has done he's done like 100 mile race, not 100, like 2,500 mile races. I mean, it's like,
wow.
Yeah, it's insane. And so that's how I got the one that was on my old show that I mentioned that was on Joe Rogan that set the world record in the 100-mile race. Because again, small community, people, and you can kind of, so, but not to talk about that.
No, I was going to say the reason I asked that question, you'll probably think it was very strange that I would. No. So this company, if I go this way, so Night of the Jumps, that's who I work with now. I watched this company, this TV show, this World Championship series when I was young in Australia 21 years ago. I now work for them. But actually one of the owners of that company, he was in, I think, the World Championships of downhill mountain bikes, but he's also a triathlete. He created his own triathlon in his little town. He's just sold that to Ironman, I think, this year. And he organizes marathons. So it's just quite funny that you're talking about marathons or ultra marathons. He does this sort of thing. Like, it's such a small world that, it all comes back.
That's why I said I feel like people who do these kinds of things, and that's why I'm always intrigued by it, because I think it takes certain kind of people to be able to do that kind of stuff, and when you really tap into why they do it and you really get into these deep conversations about that, it's like, wow, you know, like the brutality of what you go through, because I've paced on some of those long runs and I've seen those people and like what they come in and their feet are swelling and they're having hypothermia, you know, and you're like, you got to keep their salt levels up and stuff. And so I just imagine, you know, all these different sports, like what you're doing, all these different things have their own things that they have to worry about and go through. And I, you know, like when I was looking at one of your videos, I'm like, how do you do that? Like, how do you even train to do that? Like, I just don't get it. Like, I could never even get, like, I'm looking at these flips and I'm thinking, how do you just learn to like flip your bike over, you know? Like, I think it's impressive. I just think it's impressive.
It's just practice. It's just over and over and over and starting small and just getting the jump bigger and bigger and bigger. And once you've got the jump big enough, you start small with different tricks and they get bigger and bigger. And everything is just, it's a very, very, very long progression. I have seen far better riders than me with much more natural skill.
Sure.
They've come and they've gone. Maybe because it was too easy for them. They worked it out too easily and then they were out. Or generally what normally happens, as you can imagine, most guys have a big crash and that will be the end of their career. But yeah, I've seen a lot of people far better than I, but not hang in there as long, because my best years were when I got over 30. I always thought I would retire at 30, but it was from 30 I got better, more because of experience. When I was younger, I had the ability to crash and get back on the bike within 2 months of a broken bone and not care. But then when I hit 30, I realized I don't really like breaking bones that much, and it takes you longer to heal. And so I would take, I just took a few steps back in the risk, but then I ended up doing much crazier things that if I did them 10 years earlier, I would have won X Games. The tricks I did in the last couple of years of my career, if I did them 10 years earlier, I could have won X Games. But that's the same for everybody. Right. All of my friends in our sport, we all progressed up. So they would say the exact same thing. But it was like, at the time, all of those things are not possible until you see somebody do it and you go, oh, it is possible. And so it's 99% confidence in how to do, I think, any action sport. I think any sport it's confidence. I mean, if you're going to talk about pure physical running or swimming or whatever it might be, that definitely has to be fitness. But you have to then have the mental side of you that can handle to go to that point that you'll break your body, whether it's not having enough salt because you just have to get to the end of the line and that was what you dedicated your life to. That's what it takes. What it takes to get there. And that's very difficult to find. So, it is a strange one, put it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're saying all that too. And I talk about this. It's so funny on this show because I bring so many different people and I try to find people that have something part of them that resonates with what I believe and my values and things that I've done. And it's interesting because obviously I get a lot of entrepreneurs too. And I feel like even though they're different, there are lots of parallels when you talk about having like grit and resilience. And you said, making the decision and confidence, because it's funny. I just had this conversation the other day in business because I'm now approaching into my 50s. And I'm like, if I'd have known all the things I knew now, 20 years ago, I would be wealthy. I would have just figured it all out, but I'm putting this program together. Now I'm building something out to now help other female entrepreneurs not have to take 20 something years to figure this out, but I think we're all on our own journey, right? And that's where that confidence comes in. We grow as human beings. And I think we become, it's all it all starts internal. It's all in our head. You wouldn't be able to do those jumps if you didn't make a decision to do those jumps,
Exactly.
I used to say, you know, when I was running, because I exercise all the time, but I don't run near as much as I used to. It hurts. It hurts sometimes. So when I would go out, you know, and I could maybe one weekend do 2 half marathons back to back, do one on Saturday, do one on Sunday, wouldn't think anything of it. Then I'd go run a 5K the next weekend and I'd be like, I can't do this. Physically, I was trained. I was perfectly trained for all of it. But if it wasn't mentally in my head that I could do this, it would be an awful run. It was terrible. I would just, okay, this is going to be awful. So it starts with us first. You have to be, that headspace has to be there, you know?
Absolutely. That's all it is, you know? And so I hate the gym. I hate anything to do with being in a gym, doing any kind of exercise that you just sit down and do reps over and over. Like I will ride a mountain bike for as long until my legs fall off. I will do a lot of things until I can't do it anymore. But if it's sitting in a room, it's just not for me. I've tried it.
Sure.
I've been bullied into it by other friends, and every time I just go, nope, not for me. So I'm not exactly the fittest in our sport. And one of the best compliments I ever had was, as I was doing my competition with this guy was from the Czech Republic, and we were about the same age. So we were kind of the older 2 guys in this comp. So we were kind of battling each other, little friendly rivalry. Sure. And he just leaned over to my wife and said, whoa, he's pretty good and pretty flexible for a fat guy. And I went, hell yeah, that's right. So, you know.
There you go. I
beat him that day, so take that. So I did like that one, but it was all about confidence for me. You know, it didn't matter what my body could do. It was just, if I thought I could do it, I was going to do it.
I like it. Well, and that's, like I said, that's what it's really about. You know, that's what I work when I'm coaching with women all the time. It's just listening to the dialogue. You can tell if you've got that conviction that you're going to do this, then you're going to do it. And if you're, you know, maybe kind of going to try, you know, woulda, all that languaging that we start putting in our heads makes a huge difference. So that's very cool. You're doing awesome stuff.
Yeah. The one thing you said just before, actually, what would you tell yourself, you know, like the 20-year-old version of you or something like that? Mine would be just bank on yourself, you know, like I never thought that this was real. I never thought this could be a possibility. So I never actually strived for anything in this sport. I've kind of just floated along, and I've always said yes. Like anytime after that Chinese experience where I finally got my passport and I said no up until then, once I started saying yes to everything, no matter if it was the stupidest request or it was going to be the most difficult traveling scenario or something just didn't feel right. If something was actually really bad, I wouldn't do it. You know, if it was safety in what I do, definitely not. But I pretty much just started saying yes to everything. And that's kind of how I got to where I am. But I never banked on myself at the start. So if I could go back to 20-year-old me, I'd say don't be a tight ass and actually invest in the right equipment at the start. I always had the oldest bikes. I was using the oldest tires. I was doing it for fun, but if I just put that little bit extra effort or investment into what I was doing, I would have sped up what I did by 5 or 10 years, I think. Like it would be night and day almost on my career. But in saying that, I think I've learned many more lessons by doing it the way I did, because that's how I think. I'm very analytical, which is my big problem, is I will think far too much. And in this sport, it's almost like don't think, just do. So it took me 6 years to learn the backflip from when I first decided I would try it to when I landed. I've seen people who have never ridden a motorbike and have just been peer pressured into it, and they've landed a backflip within one day. And that took me 6 years, and this was my job. Because I thought too much about it. I put the fear about this one thing. It was so high up on the pedestal, I never thought I could do it.
Yeah.
And once I finally did it that day, I just went, that was it. I was so scared for 6 years for that. And man, it's so annoying, but it is what it is. I just about threw my.
Isn't that how it goes though? Isn't it? It's the way it goes, right? And you wouldn't have I always feel like you don't know what your journey would be like. I think we're all meant to arrive at the places that we're supposed to arrive. You know what I'm saying? And so even when I said that to you earlier, if I knew then what I knew now, I could have shaved off a lot of things. I could have made things differently. But then I also look and go, would I be doing this right now? Would I be doing this? Would I be talking to amazing people and having these stories and creating a platform for people to share and inspire? I studied accounting in college. We joke about this all the time, how did I study accounting in college and go from that? Like, what if I would have studied journalism or, it's just the way life is. It's a nonlinear process. And, and I think what's funny is, talking about how the investing in yourself, we all do that, don't we? It's like, we're scared to put that faith completely into what we're doing, and sometimes we overanalyze it. And then when we do it, we're just like, God, why was I thinking so hard?
Yeah. That's it. And, I think there was a bit of an audio issue there. What I did do was I invested in my time. I always looked at my time as free. So that side, I did do the right thing. I'm like, no, I'm going to do it. And if it takes this long, it'll take this long, whatever it is. So I did invest my time, but I just never invested my money. I was Scrooge McDuck. I wasn't going to spend a cent more than I had to. And it would have been way better. But then this is also something that I figured out right at the very start. I wouldn't say any of your listeners should do what I'm going to say, but I kept I saved every single dollar that I made, because I always thought, if I have a crash bad enough where I break my back and I'm in a wheelchair, or I do something else and I need to renovate a house that I have to have access, or whatever it might be, or if I need some specialized surgery that just will cost an arm and a leg, I want to try and at least give myself the best shot to pay for it. So I always squirreled my money away for that rainy day. And then when I did have my big crash, which was almost 5 years ago to the day, because it was on my wife's birthday. So she had a great birthday when I sent the photo of me laying on the gurney with my head and neck strapped in. So I broke my hip and broke my back at the time. We didn't know for about 6 weeks. That's kind of irrelevant. But the injury ended up being my career-ending injury. But I was fine. It was okay. I've now got a brand new hip. I've got a hip replacement at 38 years old, feeling fantastic. It's 6 months fresh, and best decision I made. But I've now finally got to the point in my life where I'm like, everything that I squirreled away, I kind of finally feel like I can do something with it, not just have it for that very, 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 very rainy day. I've kind of had my rainy day and I got past it fine, so it's not exactly.
You broke another milestone.
Yeah, that's it. Like it's nothing that most people would have to really think about, but then I kind of I never take health for granted, and nobody should. That's the one thing that you can't really get back. But that was something that I always had to face every single day. Was every single jump, every single day could be either my last, or it could be bone breaking, or whatever it might be. So I was very aware of that side of it. But now I'm kind of feeling like, finally I can do it. But that's the experience of getting to this age and then saying, why didn't I invest in myself 20 years ago? But I wasn't in that headspace to do that.
Sure. Makes sense. Yeah. So this is incredible. So you're doing commentating and you've got your own podcast going. I did look at your podcast, so you'll have to tell us a little. I saw it, but tell our audience so they know they can go check it out. A little bit about what you're doing now with the commentating and then the podcast work.
Yeah, well, the commentating came about just kind of naturally falling into it. I did a few shows in Australia for some friends where I just hosted their TV shows that went on like Fuel TV or Fox Sports. And there's a lot of other parts that lead up to this, but I ended up going to the World Championships, and I was there managing two of what would become two of the best riders in the world who happened to be my friends. But when I was there, so it's a German company that runs the World Championships, and I think their commentator couldn't make it to one event. I think actually it could have been an event in China was the first time, maybe in Guangzhou. And they just asked me, would you be able to, or would you like to, or can you even do this? Could you host our TV show? I said, well, yeah, I can. That's not a problem. And I think they only asked me because I was the only person there who spoke English as a first language. So it was a very easy job to get. And, so anyway, I did it. And I guess I was good enough. I wasn't great, put it that way. I've watched those videos again and they were terrible. But it was good enough to get the foot in the door on that sort of stuff. So I was helping them with marketing. I was managing the riders that were coming to their events. I'm a judge at the World Championships as well. But then the commentating just kind of naturally happened. But now, to be brutally honest, it's the most enjoyable part of the entire event. I organize these events now. So when my career ended, these two owners from the company, from Night of the Jumps, they asked me if I wanted to work for them. And within the first few months of the injury and recovery, it took me about 1 year to learn to walk again. And after about 4 months, I said, no, thank you for the offer, but I will ride again. And after another 6 months, they asked me if I'd like to work. I said, no, I'm not working. I'm a rider. And then after about a year, I kind of realized maybe I'm not riding anymore. So I didn't let them, slip away on the third time that they asked me. So I took the job. And so I organize all of the events with them and everything like that. So by the time we get to a World Championship event, you're inside the stadium, the riders are coming in, everything's set up, the lights are there, the pyrotechnics going, everything's running as smoothly as it should. I don't have to do any more work. My job is done. As long as the riders turn up, I'm now kind of free of my responsibility. My wife actually is the rider manager on the day or on the night of the show, which is great. All I have to do is commentate the show. So,
and the show,
exactly. I know the show. I can have a beer before I start commentating. I've got absolutely zero stress. And then I just go to the commentary booth, talk about motorbikes, which I can do very easily. And it's awesome. I love it. It's the best job you can have.
That's great. Well, and I think that's what happens sometimes. It's like, I feel like, I've said this multiple times on podcast episodes, how when I was in college, I took this public speaking class and I swore I was never, ever, 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 ever going to talk in front of a group of people ever again. And then I went into the network marketing space. I was with Mary Kay Cosmetics. I was with them for 20 something years. And I was a director for a very, very long time before I stepped down. And so part of my job was to train my people. And so I went from not wanting to talk to having to do small presentations to having to train people how to do the presentations to having to do trainings. And then I went into another company and had to speak on stage. And so it kind of sort of started progressing into, and then here we are today. And so I tell this story all the time, how the things that we used to sometimes we evolve into these new roles, but they still are sort of pieces of what we used to do, right? Like they sort of mold and we go into a different direction, but we're still, so now I'm still coaching. I'm still doing what I did at Mary Kay. I'm still doing presentations. I'm still talking to people, building relationships. I'm just doing it in a different way now than I did for 20 something years. So it makes perfect sense what you're doing.
Well, that's
perfect
it.
sense.
And actually, I'm the same. I hated public speaking. I wouldn't go outside if I didn't have to. I don't call for pizza. I can't do it. I hate it. So my wife has to call to get pizzas delivered because I don't want to talk to somebody on the other end of the phone.
Yeah,
and
I hate the phone.
I have no idea why I've got that. But one thing I realized when I was riding freestyle, when I was doing all of these shows, when I had my helmet on, nobody really knew who I was. So I was just doing what I did and like I said, what I would have done at home anyway. So the riding part was easy. Then you take your helmet off at the end of your run or the show, and a commentator would come and ask you, oh, hey, Steve, how was that? You had a great show, blah, blah, blah. Tell the crowd, what's it like? And you can't just give a crowd an answer of, oh, yeah, it was awesome. Or you have to... One, you have to give a very good answer. You have to entertain the crowd. Two, you have to do it in a believable way. So you have to mean what you're talking about as well. And there was actually a really good friend of mine he did pass away about a year ago or so, but he worked as a photographer for some of the best riders in the world. And the one thing he really said to me was, every time you do a jump, make sure you know either where the judges are on that side or that side. You either look at them if you want to win this competition, or if you want to get in the magazine, then you know exactly where the photographers are. So look at the photographer when you do your jump or when you do your trick, and wear the gear that you think, what does the background look like? Wear the gear that would be magazine friendly or TV friendly. I'm like, okay, never thought of it like that. And as soon as it's not hard to do. It's very simple to, dark background, bright gear, or vice versa, whatever. Once I did that, I'm like, okay, then commentators were asking me more questions. And so I had to learn how to answer those questions in front of a crowd and not just, blah, 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 drill out a few words. And so I never wanted to do it. I never did training for it. It was thrust upon me to do the job of jumping a motorbike. That was actually almost the least of my job. Like, there was so much more around it, and talking and being able to talk in public. That was a big one, which then they did TV hosting, which is awesome. Podcasting, like you said, which, so I have my podcast. Again, that was something I didn't want to do either. I saw no need for podcasting. I thought action sports is about watching. It's about seeing tricks either in photo or video form. Who wants to listen? Like, that's boring. I just couldn't get my head around it. And another very good friend of mine convinced me to do it, because he said, you are traveling the world and meeting some of the coolest or craziest people. Imagine if you had 10 minutes with such and such and da-da-da. Yeah, that would have been cool. So I got into it just before COVID kicked in, and still going. And turns out a lot of people listen to podcasts. I never would have thought. Every day's a school day. I learned something new.
I think this is so good, because I feel like if you look at the macro picture of this, the writing for you, not to say that that was easy at all, but that came kind of natural to you in the sense that you loved and enjoyed that, right? Like you had a talent for it, you trained, and you kind of maximized that. Whereas the speaking wasn't, but you learned the big thing here by doing the other thing first to get to the bigger. So I feel like on some macro level, isn't it weird how your thing that to everybody like us, that bike thing is hard. Like I look at that and go, wow. But for you, the hard thing was the speaking thing. Like this is the thing that was didn't come to you naturally. So I think that the story is so so just awesome. And that's how it is for us, I think, in life is our big thing is all relative to us.
Exactly right. Like the riding, I've done that since I was 4 years old. Breaking bones, not an issue. I actually look forward to when I'm, let's say, after the pain, if it's surgery, if I'm just recovering, because I get to play video games for about 2 or 3 months and I have the best excuse in the world. How good's that? Like, it's awesome. I can't really get away with it that much anymore, but it was good for about 20 years where I'm like, oh, look, all I can do is play video games. Sorry. That's all I'm doing now.
That's so funny. That's great. That's great. Well, I think what you're doing is awesome. I do want to ask you kind of a fun question for our audience, because I think, I think this is just a really cool question to ask different people coming from different places. So if you were going to give some advice, not necessarily to somebody going to go, do motocross freestyle, because we don't know that everybody's going to do that. We know it's a small group, but maybe somebody that's trying to overcome. Yeah. Maybe somebody's trying to overcome that big monster that they're, that big hurdle they're trying to do. What is something that you would say to them to help encourage them to push forward and do that?
The monster that I had, when people say you have a monkey on your back,
right.
Mine turned into King Kong, and it was that backflip that I was talking about before. It took me 6 years. I was screaming at myself every day driving home from my friend's place where I was training to do this. And it was a 4-hour drive, and I was just so angry at myself that I couldn't mentally get past the block that was stopping me from doing it. And in the end, he was going to do a trick that if he landed it, he would have won X Games that day. Unfortunately, he crashed and actually got much more YouTube views on that one for his crash than if he did the trick. But anyway, he was learning this brand new thing, and it was about a month before X Games, and he said, I can't keep pulling you out of my foam pit because I have to train. So, for the next month or two, you're either going to do this or you're not. I thought, yeah, you're right. This is 6 years that I've been doing this, and I've been doing the same thing over and over. I've tried to do things a little bit differently and it didn't work. Or just keep going. I thought if I just keep training, doing the same thing, that something would click, and it wouldn't. So then I really thought about it after he said that. And I thought, let's break this down to the very most basic part of it. I said, can I do this off a much smaller jump? To me, the jump was it was too big. I couldn't get my mind around the fear that if I made a mistake, it could be the end of everything. And I said, well, if we just push this ramp into the smallest it can go to the jump, can I still get a backflip around? He's like, yeah, of course you can. Oh, okay. So can we do that tomorrow? So we did. We moved the ramp in. I did a backflip into. I'd always been doing backflips into the foam pit. It's this massive pit about 4 meters deep, or I don't know what's that in feet, 12, 14 feet deep of foam. So it's relatively safe before you go to dirt, which is a hard surface. And I just did maybe 5 or 6 into the foam pit and I went, that was easy. Said, okay, let's put the ramp to dirt. And he kind of rolled his eyes and just went, are we really doing this? I really don't have time. I said, yep, take it to dirt. I'm going to go do it. And I did one speed check just to make sure I was going the right speed when I jumped. And then on the next jump, I pulled back. I did the backflip. Couldn't believe that I finally did it. And I looked over at him to say, did you get that on video? And he didn't even have his camera on. He's he said, I've seen you do this for 6 years. I didn't think you were going to do that. So just go again. Oh, okay. And so before the adrenaline kicked in that I did it and celebrate and whatever, I didn't have time for celebration. I had to go and do this damn backflip again just so I got the video evidence that I did do it. And then after the second one, I just went, I've now done it twice. Oh, that was easy. And then by the end of that afternoon, it was almost like that fear. There was definitely a lot more. It took me about 1 year to really get used to it. But but the main part of that was this one thing that took me so long that I risked everything for, or I felt like I was risking everything for. Once I stepped back and I broke it down and I made it the smallest thing possible, something that I felt was manageable, easy. So that's my advice. If,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm very analytical with what I do in everything, in business, in whatever. But if you've got that same, whatever the example might be, just break it down to the smallest segments and just work on those, and something will click. And if you're interested in actually what you're doing, you'll go through the process anyway. So that's not really the issue. If the listeners here are kind of into the entrepreneurial space anyway, like generally you're doing what you're doing because you love it. Right. So if there's that fear of the next step, just break it down smaller bits, and once you feel happy with how this one little thing's going, then you step up to the next one and the next one. Like it's just a journey.
I like the story that you used, though. That was good, because I feel like stories are what people can resonate with. Stories. It may not be that they don't see themselves doing that particular thing, but they can look at that and go, okay, how did he take that big, that big monkey, whatever that was, monster monkey, whatever you want to call it, and break that down into
King Kong, Donkey Kong. It was God, and it was unbearable. It was absolutely unbearable. The stress that I had for years, and it all just disappeared in one moment. It was the weirdest feeling you could possibly have. But I've had that same feeling when I've done different things in business as well. Like we built a moto park. So a very good friend of mine, he was retiring, or he knew he would retire in a couple of years. And he said to me, I want to give up. I've had enough. My knees are just stuffed. I can't keep doing this forever. I didn't really do anything after school. I just rode motorbikes. I don't have any other skills other than riding a motorbike. And so he said, I want to build a park where people can come and ride motorbikes, if it's motocross or freestyle, or for kids to learn, ride enduro, whatever it was. But he said, I don't know how to do the business side, but I know how to build. I know how to build jumps. I know how to build tracks. So if you want, let's do this together. And that took us 5 years. I laughed at him when he first told me. I was like, nah, there's no way. And then we started doing the budget, and we thought, okay, well, we need a minimum of $2 million to at least buy some land and get some bulldozers and excavators, and then we've got to build the track, and then we've got to bring people in, and then it has to pay back that money. And well, how are we going to get $2 million? And then I somehow managed to find some investors. And once that kind of happened, we then went to the council, and we met a mayor of this council. And basically all we wanted him to do would be, if this happens in your district, would you help us with getting the documents signed? What do we have to do to get this done? And we told him the plan, and he just, he's like this big bloke and big cowboy hat on, and he just sits back in his chair and said, well, sounds like you boys know what you're talking about. I'll let you in on a secret. The state government, they're not going to win the next election. They need your park. So do you want $2 million in investor money, or do you want $2 million in free money? Free money.
Wow.
So, but that would never have happened if all of those other steps in the background didn't lead to that point. I kind of laughed at the start of that idea. I thought, no, not possible. Who are we to do that? And then 5 years later, somehow materialized, and it was just all these little tiny steps that got you there in the end.
I love it. Well, you are doing awesome things. I think it's great. And I just want to say thanks so much for sharing this with our people. Cause like I said, we've got a variety of people that come in here and listen, from athletes to entrepreneurs. And like I said, I feel like even though we're all doing different things, there's a lot of core elements that are very similar in all the different areas. And so the big thing here is, biting off things into small chunks, right? And I will say something about you. When you talk about that 6 years persistence, you definitely have persistence. I can already see that, because there's no way that you could stick with something long enough. Most people can't. They give up if it doesn't happen, and it happens in business too. Something doesn't go their way. They say that didn't work out. Well, you tried one time. We don't know. I mean, I'm like, you didn't give enough time. You got to do it. Well, you got to do it a few more times. Find out. So you definitely have persistence. So what I want to know, obviously, our audience can definitely go look you up. I mean, you're not hard to find. You're easy. But is there anywhere that you want to send them as far as websites go, or any particular place to any of these things that you've got going on?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I wear too many different hats.
I know.
Look, you can find me in a few different places, but I mean, there's stevesommerfeld.com. That is probably a little bit of an old website. I do need to revamp that, because I feel like there's a second part of my career coming. Let's say in the next 6 months to a year. I'm not going to put it out publicly what I've got planned, but it should be an awesome next step. I want to take all of the skills I learned from riding a motorbike and put it into something just a little bit different, and something that can keep me going until I'm 80.
Yeah.
Probably not 80. Maybe 50 or 60. I'll be happy. No,
Gotcha.
The Riders Lounge podcast. If you're interested in action sports, if anybody's interested, I interview my friends, but I am very happy to say that they are some of the best, most interesting riders in the world that I've got to luckily meet. Like, they're my heroes, and I get to talk to them, which is fantastic. But also nightofthejumps.com. That is the World Championship Series. If you want to follow what the riders are doing throughout the season, check that one out. So it's different countries. It's on different TV stations. I think in America, I feel like it must be on Fox Sports. I can't remember. I think America, there's something with the distribution. I can't remember what channel it's on in America, but around the world, Fox Sports or Eurosport.
Yeah, we're going to hope our people are crafty. They can figure this out, right? Like
they'll figure it out. That's it. So if you want to listen to me talk about motorbikes, that's where you'll find it.
Very cool. I always feel like, on this show, we're trying to empower our people to be resourceful, right? Like, we want them to be strong people. And that's why I try to find cool people to come on here to empower them. We don't have to like lead them by the hand. We just kind of give them a little guide and a nudge and let them be resourceful.
That's it. That's right? You'll work it out. Google's your best friend.
That's right. Steve, you are awesome. I'm so glad that we got to get on here and talk about your journey and what you're doing. And I'm going to keep following you and keeping up with what you got going on. And, but I do want to say thank you so much for sharing with our audience and taking time out of your day. I know we're on different schedules. And so thanks so much for being willing to do that.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me on. It was awesome to jump in, and I hope somebody takes something out of it. That would be awesome.
Absolutely. Well, and of course, we do want to say to our listeners, if you enjoy our show, please be sure you give us a rating both on iTunes and Facebook. We can't do this without you. Hit that subscribe button on the YouTube. I would say do that. And we want to leave you guys with a final parting thought. In order to live the extraordinary, you must start. And every start begins with a decision. You guys take care, be safe, and be kind to one another. We will see you next time.